Hey, what's up, guys? This is Oakley, and you may have heard, but there's been some relatively big news on the Total War Warhammer front. Um, Basically, they've announced that the release date is going to be April 28th, 2016, so that's 6 months from now, but already they're announcing pre-order DLC incentives. So with me today here, we're going to be discussing just our impressions of that, kind of going over the pros and cons and our general opinion. So I have here two people, I guess, on our panel, you could call it. One is going to be Arch Warhammer. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi there, I'm Arch Warhammer. I mostly do Total War lore stuff on my channel, along with some other Let's Plays and random nonsense.
And then we also have Indie Pride from Milk and Cookies Total War. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey guys, I'm Andy Pride from Milk and Cookies Total War. I run a Total War channel over, and I'm right now currently doing a bunch of Call of Warhammer content, which is an awesome mod from Medieval 2, but I also played a lot of Shogun 2 multiplayer and Rome 2 multiplayer as well. So my channel is very much multiplayer focused for the Total War series.
Cool. Yeah, so now that we've had our introductions, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what's been announced so far. So, like I said, the game is slated to launch. They say coming April 20th, 2016, so that's about 6 months from now. And with that, like I said, they've announced two pre-order incentives. One is going to be called the High King Edition. So that comes with a bunch of additional stuff we've come to know from the modern gaming industry. So they put like maps, different items, stuff you can collect, art, books, and all that stuff. It's rather expensive, and then there's another limited edition that has a scaled down version of that. However, both of them do come with what they're calling this Chaos Warriors Race Pack. If you go ahead and check the Steam page, you can actually see that that is up and running, and it's got full fleshed out details. And so I'll link that below if you want to look at all the details. I'm going to now pass it over to these two guys. I think we'll start with Arch, just to give his initial impressions. I know online people have been rather apprehensive about this. I myself was shocked that 6 months in advance they're not only announcing that they're cutting out chaos, or maybe my framing cutting out is a bit indicative of where I stand. Anyways, yeah. So they've announced that chaos is here. That is in and of itself a shock, and especially how much details they've apparently shown for chaos so far kind of seems to indicate that this isn't planned future DLC, more so cutout DLC. So I'll pass it on to Arch, who has some feedback.
Well, for me, I am just of the staunch opinion that if you absolutely have to do day one DLC, which you should never do, at the very least have the decorum of giving us this a month or so in advance. If you absolutely have to shit on us, do it with some kind of, gentleness. But 6 months for what appears to be cut content is just egregious, in my opinion.
Yeah, so right there we framed it both as cut content. I think the reasoning behind why we're kind of more comfortable stating, or at least being of the opinion that it's cut content, is because, like Arch said, it's 6 months in advance. The traditional rationale you see being posted behind DLC like this, it's like, oh, the artists are kind of done with all their work. They're going to go ahead and work on special extra projects like DLC, but it's only after they've done the base game and it's with their free time. The thing that's kind of the tell in this is, well, they've done it far in advance. It seems pretty fleshed out, and they haven't even given us full details on the vampire counts, the greenskins, let alone an army roster as detailed as what they've just shown about chaos. So what they're showing here is this is very much, I wouldn't say complete, but very much well thought out, and they've put a lot of resources into it, which is counter to what you would think DLC would be. And it's kind of indicative of the way the gaming industry has been trending. I know Indy is here. He has some counterpoints to that, or he's going to be playing a little bit of devil's advocate. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, so I personally was obviously very surprised to see that Chaos was announced as a pre-release or pre-order faction. I think a lot of people didn't expect to see Chaos until later games. I know I didn't expect to see them until probably like a mainline faction in the second or third game, probably the second, just because I didn't expect them to wait too long for Chaos. But they're a really iconic faction, and so from the standpoint that they're one of the main races that people love in the Warhammer universe, I definitely understand why people are angry. And obviously, with the release of Rome 2 and Empire's release and some of those other Total War games, I can understand why people are really like hopping mad about something like this. One thing that I think is important that a lot of people are overlooking right now is that Okay, let's say this was 2 years ago, like a year after Rome 2 was released, like I'd probably be just as upset as everybody else because back then there wasn't a great uh, Steam refund system in place. But the thing is, there is now a really good Steam refund system, and I'm going to read it verbatim what that Steam refund system says, and I'm going to explain why it's important to what we're talking about right now. So, Steam refund offer within 2 weeks of purchase and with less than 2 hours of playtime applies to games and software applications on the Steam store. When you pre-purchase a title on Steam and have paid for the title in advance, you can request a refund at any time prior to the release of that title. The standard 14-day, 2-hour refund period also applies starting on the game's release. So, what does that mean? Well, it basically means that after the release of the game, you're going to have 2 weeks to make the decision on whether to keep the game or get a refund on it. If Total War Warhammer releases and is just god awful, it's a horrible game, bugs everywhere, it's disgusting, no one wants to play it, well, you're going to know that in those 2 weeks because you're going to be watching YouTubers, you're going to be reading reviews, you're going to be looking at the forums to see, hell, is this game going to be worth my money or not? And if there are tons of bugs, and if the game is terrible like Rome 2 was at release, you're going to be like, hell no, I want to get rid of this game, get your refund, you're good to go. There was a big lawsuit recently, I think, where Steam was trying to, or I don't remember what the specifics of the lawsuit were, but basically it protected customers a lot. This system that Steam has involved now protects you really, really well. So as long as you don't play more than 2 hours, which you won't have to do because you're watching YouTube videos, reading reviews, all that, just being patient, you won't have to actually spend that money. So in my opinion, you're spending the normal money that you'd spend anyway. You're just pre-ordering the game. You get Chaos for free. It's a free faction. It's coming with the game. And then if you don't want the game, or you're like, wow, I feel really betrayed by what CA did here, you give it up, you get all your money back, and you don't have to worry about it at all. So I understand why people are upset about Chaos being cut out of the game, but from the beginning, CA's been saying there are four factions: Greenskins, Vampire Counts, Dwarfs, and Empire. They said nothing about Chaos. I didn't feel like Chaos was even going to be in this game to begin with. So it's hard for me to complain about cut content when they're like, there were only going to be four factions in the game at release. So that's my standpoint on it.
Okay, Arch, did you have any comments on that? I know I have a couple of things I could state. Not that it's a debate back and forth or, don't want to get argumentative, but I think there are some counterpoints to that. And I did think Indy made some good points as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is not an argument where we're going to be bitch and yell at each other because, well, what's the point of that? But he does
I
make a
hate both of you.
fantastic point with Steam refund. This, thank you very much. But yeah, you made a wonderful point about Steam refund. I made a second rant video because I'm an angry bastard mentioning that exact thing, and it is fantastic that we finally have a weapon to use like that. Because I would call this a weapon. This is finally a thing we have to use against the developers, just giving us crap that doesn't bloody work, which we didn't have before. Granted, Steam is it's still just a 2 hour refund, which if you're after playing 2 hours, you can't refund anymore over the 2 week period, which in the vast majority of civilized nations on Earth is still egregiously illegal in every single way of the word, but hey, at least it's the start. So that is good. We didn't have that before. It's fantastic. If it's broken, people will know. They can play an hour by themselves and go, like, okay, so far so good, but what happens later? Total War games are relatively large after all. And with today's internet, where you have streamers, you have videos, you have all this stuff, finding information on whether or not the game is playable shouldn't be that hard. And I think if, God forbid, this game turns out to be crap, and we hit them with full refunds, they're never going to do this again because the back to okay, that was a lot of backlash, but it's verbal. Developers like not developers, but large companies like Sega don't give a crap about verbal feedback. They don't give a crap about threats unless they're actually backed up. And if let's just take a random number, let's say 100,000 people buy the game, just a random number, and 90,000 of those people refund, that they are going to understand.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I think it's important to realize that there is now a counterweight to what the sort of consumer protection. Because if you had this before without any consumer protection, then I think everyone would be 100% against. But now that we have a tool to fight back, it seems like it's not as big of an issue. The problem I still see with this is you'll notice that all the pre-order stuff comes with physical items, right? So it's not just pre-ordering and getting a little, Steam access code that you can then refund in 2 hours. You're going to have to send back everything in the box. You bought this expensive box with all this equipment. I think it's much harder to return that type of stuff. I'm pretty sure that you can still send the whole box back, but it seems like they're trying to tie in this pre-orders thing with like a lot of physical items. So the likelihood of someone then repackaging all that stuff, paying for shipping, or going through that hassle, it seems much harder, especially with a game like Total War, where 2 hours might not be enough to expose those problems. I think if the game is really shitty, I think a fair amount of people will use the Steam policy to return, but just due to the fact that it is tied to these physical items, and the fact that they've made those pretty expensive, that I think they're going to actually have a fairly high retention rate, even if the game is crappy, of people not going to return. On
Well,
top of,
does the Steam policy apply to physical copies of the game?
see,
Because I thought it was a Steam only kind of thing.
see, that's what I'm not sure. So
The thing
Either
is,
way,
it
I think
depends
that
on country to country. But the thing is that online law is almost it isn't fleshed out anywhere. So you go, this complicates the matter. You got your physical stuff, which is returnable because it's a physical item. That's by law you have the right to return it. But then there's the digital part, and you could argue that the digital part is worth, to take a number again, 50 euros, and the physical is worth 30 euros. Maybe they can get away with only giving you back the digital part, or vice versa. We don't know.
yeah, so
but
that's one of the hassles I see. Andy, you had a comment about that?
yeah, first, I don't think that they're gonna like the percentage of overall consumers that buy the physical copies are probably gonna be pretty small, at least if we're talking about the limited edition or the High King edition. I think a very small percentage of people are gonna spend the 40 or 50 extra dollars to get those limited edition ones. So from that standpoint, yeah, there's that.
The only two editions currently on sale is Hiking and Limited. And both of them come with physical stuff, so there is currently no option to just buy the game.
Yeah, so that could be problematic. But I think just at base, what kind of rubs me in the wrong direction is the fact that this is so clearly fleshed out, was so clearly thought in advance to be a portion of the game that, hey, let's develop this in parallel, let's flesh it out 6 months in advance, let's have it to the point where it could have been in the game, and let's just not have it in the game. And that's just a fundamental choice that they made well in advance for marketing reasons to sell the game even more and to get more money out of it. I think CA has made some pretty good steps recently in terms of their trailers, putting out messages to say what exactly a cinematic trailer means, how well does it represent the game. They've been pretty clear about that, and they gained a little bit more credibility in my eyes, and they regained a little bit of their honor. But then they go ahead and there's a marketing push like this that just shits all over their image. And it just goes to show that it's kind of when you see the marketing mechanism that just completely exposed, and that's I think what rubs me the wrong way. The fact that this is just so in your face, um, denuded almost. The fact that they have this so well fleshed out and it's so targeted to sell the game in advance and get you to buy these physical copies and just get that much more money. It's just that it's jarring, I think.
Yeah,
Well,
and the point you made originally, this isn't stuff they're going to work on slightly after launch, like when they have nothing else to do. This is 6 bloody months, so yeah.
I think a lot of the furor is coming from people who weren't planning on pre-ordering, and now they're like, oh crap, one of my favorite factions is a pre-order exclusive. It feels like you're holding me hostage to pre-order. So for the people who have already pre-ordered the game, the people with the physical copies, this isn't really an issue. They already pre-ordered the game. They're like the people that already pre-ordered are probably pretty happy for the most part that they just announced that Warriors of Chaos are going to be in the game because one, they didn't know that Warriors of Chaos were going to be in the game, and they're just like, oh, this is a cool thing. Like, I didn't know that was going to be happening. They were already planning on pre-ordering with the four factions, so they probably already felt like, oh, Greenskins, Vampire Counts, Empire, and Dwarves. That's enough. That's enough content for me. Oh, I get a whole nother race for free now? That's awesome. So we're not worried about them so much. We're talking more about the people who are very upset that Warriors of Chaos are getting added in, and those are people that didn't want to pre-order in the first place.
Yeah, and I
So,
think that's a good point where you feel like you're very much being forced to. And they've realized in the past with Attila not selling as many copies, hey, how do we sell more copies? Well, we force people to pre-order. We force those initial sales to be, bumped up. And how do we do that? Well, we make the offer irresistible. And that's what we're seeing here is this
Cut out the cool
is
faction.
is yeah, exactly, is them just throwing so much on that, on one scale as you're trying to weigh should I buy pre-order or not, and they're putting so much on one end that, like I said, it's just exposing the marketing behind it, and it feels like they're really trying to force your hand, and that's what's
but but
uncomfortable.
but that's the thing though, is that in my opinion, like I'm not uncomfortable about it at all because we have the consumer protection now. Now we were talking about like the 2 hour thing, like you can only play 2 hours, but I think the playtime is irrelevant because Arch is right. You can't play for 2 hours and know everything about a Total War game. They're way too big. But if you're watching reviews from, let's say, five big gaming sites and then looking at YouTube content from 10 different YouTubers and then looking at like articles written by 20 other websites, that's going to be enough information for you to know whether pre-ordering is worth it or not. And when all that information is said and done in that first 2 weeks, there will be enough people playing that you will have heard bad things about the game if there are bad things about it. You're going to hear about it. You're going to hear about performance issues. You're going to hear about everything that people don't like. But as long as you hear that information, which you will then be able to get your money back. So you're pre-ordering on Steam and oh, this game sucks. You're getting your money back. So there's no danger for you as a consumer. Like if it was Rome 2 before there was a good Steam refund system in place, yeah, you're screwed. The pre-order getting forced into buying a faction Sparta or whatever sucks because you have no protection. Now you do. So at least from my vantage point, it's really hard to get worked up about it because you have the opportunity to get all your money back for it.
From my side point of view, it's we have protection now, which is great. But my annoyance is more the simple fact that I have a piece of a completed game. The Warriors of Chaos are going to be finished upon launch. Otherwise, like if they announce later that the Warriors of Chaos will be released later, like they'll come out 2 months after, a lot of my grievances disappear. But for the moment, we are assuming that they come out immediately because that's what it looks like, pre-order DLC and stuff. And that means that they have fully, knowingly, and willingly removed one faction from the game. The fact that they promised us four is great, but they made five, and they took that one out to sell us, to hold it ransom and go, if you want the full game experience, if you want the quests, the magic, the units, you have to give us money now. Which I just, it's such a cancerous practice that I feel we need to start putting our foot down and stopping it because it only gets worse. Look at games development history; it only gets worse. The more they get away with, worse shit gets.
Yeah, and my fear is banking off of this is like, okay, maybe in the future 1/5 of every game is going to be locked behind a paywall, forcing you to pre-order. Where do they go from there? Well, you can just
Three
imagine,
fifths.
okay, well, we've created, 1/5 of it is pre-order. Oh, what if I make the next fifth not even pre-order? What if I make that next fifth DLC that I can release 1 month into the game? And so that's the trend that's going forward. Like already, this is just the Chaos Warriors race pack. I guarantee there's going to be a Chaos Demons race pack. I guarantee there's going to be so many DLC packs in this game that they're probably even working on now that could have been in the base game, and it's feeding into that whole milking us sensation as well. We haven't even talked about future DLC. Um,
There's, yeah, when you look at Warhammer though, and like what we know is going to be in Total War Warhammer, like you compare the DLC for that or the games coming afterwards to something like Attila or Rome 2. Like in my opinion, you look at two factions, dwarfs and vampire counts. There is more variety in those two factions than there was in all of Attila combined, including the new DLCs, including the Empires of Sand. So, like, hell, we know that Attila, it was like 70% Germanic factions. We know that most people got bored of it pretty quickly because they all had mostly the same roster, and then there was the occasional unit that got added in that was unique for the Langobards or unique for the Alamans, but it was basically just a reskin unit. You can't reskin a dwarf unit and call it a greenskin. You can't reskin a dragon ogre Shaggoth and call it a chaos giant or a warrior of chaos or a lizardman carnosaur. You can't do that. It doesn't work. They are going to be completely different. There's so much variety in this game. Even in those four factions, there's so much more variety in that than I think we've probably ever seen in a Total War game before. That look, I completely understand your guys' arguments about, oh, they cut that fifth race out of the game. That's really annoying. I understand that the business practice itself is a problem, and I'm obviously not a big fan of it either. But it feels like it's when they promise us four races and there's so much variety in that already. Like I understand there's a slippery slope argument you could go with that, but it's just hard for me to get worked up because I know how much content and how much work is being put into this game. I don't feel like even if we only had those four factions, I'd be getting screwed out of my money at all.
You feel you're getting your money's worth for the four factions.
For the first game?
Yeah, you were satisfied with the four factions basically for the first price. Is the argument you're making? I assume, if I understood it correctly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I
Yeah.
did think so.
Yes. Which I do agree with. The problem for me is the fact that I would be perfectly fine with Chaos Warriors as a DLC. If it had come 2 months after launch, I would have gone, okay, fine. There's a lot of work in these factions. I don't mind. I expect to be milked for this game. Oh heavens, I do. I expect to be milked for color palette,
Yeah.
units, for nations, for music. I expect to get milked like a cow on our first day out. But
That's hot.
this is cut content, which is the base of my argument. This should have been in the game, and it has been removed purposefully. And if you're fine with the four factions in the base game, then this is just a bonus. But for me, this is one of those games when I finally have to go. Like, okay, I have wanted Total Warhammer for so many years, and they do this, and I want to buy it. I was already going to pre-order the game, and now I have decided not to pre-order it because this can't be
Mm,
rewarded. If they get away with this once,
really?
they're going to get away with it again.
Yeah, and I think we've retreaded the same steps over and over
Yeah,
again. So
yeah.
I wanna take this in a slightly different direction. So one of the upsides that I maybe see about them drawing so much attention to this game and there being so many people playing the game, well, potentially based off the numbers we've seen in views so far, is it seems like a lot more people are going to be available to buy the DLC. Now, hopefully, that means that because it's a fixed amount of manpower to create that DLC, and because potentially they can sell to more people, it will hopefully allow them to spread the development costs across more people, and the price per DLC will be driven down. I know in previous games, not only has the DLC been repetitive, but because there was less people buying the DLC, they had to increase the price to make up for the cost of production. Hopefully for this, we'll have the inverse. We'll have varied DLC and we'll have that price spread out in such a way that the cost is lower. So that's my hope for DLC in the future, and that's where I think there is a little glimmer of light. If it's well priced and it's well varied and it's well constructed, then I think DLC will totally be worth it.
Certainly,
But
good DLC is always worth it. It's just one, will it be good, and two, what will it be priced?
yeah, yeah, and I guess on that front, there's not too much more we can comment on. So I think we've done a good job of looking at both sides of the issue. I think at the end of the day, we both agree that the consumer needs more defense. As long, we're kind of fine with what the developers choose to do, as long as we have protections and we have a way to retaliate and we have a way to get the money back. As long as it's a balanced playing field, then I think I'm okay with the practice. I think my opinion right now is that the consumer protection just isn't really there. I know the Steam has officially kind of put this up. I don't think it's developed and been practiced and tried out, for long enough to see if it has an impact on the developer, if it adequately protects the consumer. So that's kind of my opinion on that. But I think Indy's made some good points, and I've been swayed a little bit, but I'm still. I mean, I can say which way I stand, one way or another, but at the end of the day, I am probably going to get a reviewer's copy of this, so I'm a little biased in that sense. So, did you guys have any closing statements before we end this ramble, this rant?
Yeah, I do think, I don't think I said this already, but I do think that something like Kislev or Britonia or Wood Elves would have been a much better choice for a pre-order faction. I know you guys obviously don't like that idea at all, but again, Warriors of Chaos are so iconic and so many people love them that I think that adding them as the DLC race was really kind of not the smartest marketing decision from CA's part. So many people like them that it just doesn't make that much sense. I think someone like Kislev or maybe the Border Princes, someone that's not quite as iconic, would have probably been a smarter decision. I think CA probably could have avoided some of the backlash. Lots of people would have still been upset about pre-order DLC, but they could have avoided some of this for sure.
And if I may, at the end, I think that would be a good idea to add in something else rather than Chaos. Partially also because I hold the controversial opinion that Chaos should not be playable, or if they should be playable, they should be playable in some smaller capacity. And what it looks like now is we get full command over the entirety of the Chaos Horde, which I fear that means they are going to have to make Chaos playable, and if they're going to have to make Chaos playable, they're going to have to make them balanced, which I fear is going to take away a lot of the threat that Chaos is supposed to be in the Warhammer universe.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot more we could talk about. I know both of you guys have your own videos on your channel, so I'll direct people in the description below. You can check out those links. Anyways, we're gonna be signing off for now. Stay tuned for more on my channel and both of these guys' channel. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.